All right. So we're getting set up here. So we're going to have to be tucked in real tight.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting tucked in real tight. Make sure you can see that too. Oops. Let's not touch the camera too much. All right. Okay, well, hey. Welcome, guys. My name is Gus Ortiz, and this is the Ortiz Anomaly podcast. We are here with Justin Sandler, and on this podcast, we talk about real estate, we talk about the economy, we talk about business, all kinds of other stuff. We might go on a tangent. So this is meant to be a conversation. So typically, I don't refer other than to our audience here, except for at the intro and at the outro. But you're welcome to do so if you feel the need to. But the purpose of today's conversation is really just for us to have just sort of a natural conversation about all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
So I know that you've been involved. I met you through real estate actually, many years ago.
Yep.
And you have evolved as a person since I met you, which has been really interesting to see.
Thank you.
And
hopefully I evolved in a good direction. I guess I shouldn't say thank you. Yeah. That could be like, you have really evolved downward as a person.
Well, I guess
like,
technically
you're such a piece of shit now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically you'd be devolved, right? So evolved is the idea.
That's a positive.
Yeah, it's a positive.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah. Sometimes they have to ask these things.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So, I know that you were in traditional real estate, and then you got into new home construction, and then now you're also a business coach, right? Or something like that.
Performance.
What is that? What is that?
So what I have in my little LinkedIn profile is it says that I work one-on-one with business owners in Orlando, Florida to optimize performance. So
and what does that mean? Like when because I mean that has all kinds of potential meanings.
Sure.
So what exactly does that mean to optimize performance? Like for the individual person, for their business, for their team? Like what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's funny because it's been such a journey for me of figuring out exactly what to call what I do. But I would say, there's a major financial element to it. So people show up and they make more money. But there's also a personal life element, and we're focusing on each category of their life and looking to optimize it. And then I'm a huge believer that all the different categories of life affect each other and that they also affect business.
Sure.
When we're improving that, they end up selling more as well. So it's all kind of trying to figure out how to get them to show up. And it's approached from a lot of angles, like working with them to learn to manage their state, how they show up. But again, also a lot of these personal life things. And I find that there's a lot of money left on the table because there's all these different categories of our life that we sort of think of as secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Business people, I think, are famous for, there's business and then there's everything else. And I'll get to the everything else if I can, but if not, it is what it is. And it's sort of seen as like not related to performance. And that's not what I find with the people I help and in my own life.
Interesting.
And so it's sort of like a holistic approach, but it's a very much like results approach. I come from sales. Everything has always been about results. So it's a very focused, results-oriented process.
Okay, so if I were to come to you and I was like, hey, Justin, the type of person that would come to you would be someone who feels like maybe they've hit a ceiling or they're not growing the way that they were hoping to, and they're not meeting their own expectations, and they're kind of like, I don't know how I can get out of this rut that I'm in. Is that the kind of person that you typically work into, or is it like is it different? Like, are they different stages? Like what's the kind of like person that you'd be ideally like set up to like hit out the ballpark?
Right. So I think I can tell you why I started this originally was when I was at KB Home that I began to think about this. I'd been through a lot of therapy in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Like as the customer or client or patient or whatever the right word is for that.
Sure.
And I would always go in there and I would be ready to work and solve problems. And I thought that's what it was going to be. And it was never that way. And I was always really frustrated by that. Because I'm like, what type of a service is this? And there are good therapists out there. So if we got any therapists watching, you might be one of the good ones, right? There are good ones and they're good and bad of everything, realtors and everybody. But I don't know. I just always thought, like, where do the people go who are really high performing, who are results oriented, who that's not the service they're looking for? So life doesn't look how they want. They're falling apart. whether personal, business wise, the whole thing, how it fits together.
Yeah.
They don't want to go see a therapist because they've always been paid on results and what they do and paid on speed. And therapy is more like, or oftentimes it's like, hey, 3 years will go by. Maybe we make some breakthroughs. Maybe we don't. And for someone who's always paid on what they produce and results and speed, that's not always really something they want to do.
I see.
And so I wanted to be a resource for those people of like, hey, we can do a results oriented, fast paced alternative to that where we figure out why does this not look how you want. And it sounds so simple, like, oh, know what you want and move towards it. But we're not taught how to do that or what that means. It's like specialized knowledge, just like any specialized knowledge, like real estate. And so I find that there's specialized things that I can help people with it. When we look at their state, when we look at these different areas of their life, there's a lot of things we can do to improve that. And they make more money because of it.
Interesting.
So, but that's where it originally came from, was like, where do these people go when they're stuck, when they're miserable, when like they don't know what to do? And usually performance is being affected too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you have clients that you've been working with. What do you find is sort of some of the biggest challenges that is there like a theme that you see with like the biggest challenges that entrepreneurs run into?
Yeah, gosh.
Or it's just all over the place.
I guess there's a lot. I mean, I guess I could just talk of what's popping into my head as we're talking, but one of them is definitely disregarding all areas of life except for work and thinking that doesn't have to do with business and thinking that doesn't have to do with performance and money and they don't have time. And I think that's a major error.
Interesting.
So like, this is to me the easiest example that always pops into my head, but let's say there's business owner, like a broker owner, it could be anybody.
Yeah.
And let's say that on a scale of 1 to 10, their relationship with their spouse is a 2, right? And let's say they're sleeping on opposite ends of the bed. They're not talking. They're fighting every day. They're really going after each other. Maybe on a weekly basis, they're threatening divorce to each other. Maybe there might be affairs that are starting to happen. They're rolling their eyes at each other. They have disdain for each other. And let's say this person's making like $300,000 a year. And this is part of their everyday life and it's taking up headspace. And so we think these things are separate, but let's say there's all the areas of our life and then there's us, and then there's us going to do our business or whatever we're doing. So sometimes when we keep it abstract, it sort of seems like it doesn't relate. But when we do an example like that, if you really think that broker owner that's making 300 grand or whatever is going into every single one of those meetings and things with their employees and things with their agents and things with the lenders and things with their backlog and things with everything, because the more money you're dealing with, the more all of these things of how you show up matter. So when you think about it like that, it's like, oh yeah, that is probably affecting it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what is your relationship with God like? What is your relationship with your kids like? What is your health like, mental and physical? Do you have any friendship type of stuff in your life?
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you love? Do you have any adventure elements of your life? So there's all these categories I track, and I've seen people who are struggling with these different areas, and there's no way that they're showing up how they should be.
Sure.
So in business, we talk about KPIs, right? Like the key performance indicators, and maybe we know our customer acquisition cost and our lifetime value and our customer satisfaction scores or whatever. And those are obviously important, but I sort of think of these as like invisible KPIs. Like all these areas of our lives are these massive, important stats that we don't track. And that's a problem. And so that's a big part of what I'm doing with people, is being like, hey man, this stuff matters. If we work on this, you're going to make more money. The other thing that I'll just throw out briefly, I'm sure you have thoughts about the stuff I just said, but teaching them to manage their state meaning how they're showing up in the world day to day and moment to moment. So with real estate, you either get the contract signed or you don't, right? You either close the person or you don't. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, your difference of a state being like a 9 or 9.5 versus a 10 is the difference between you closing that person and not, or is the difference between lead generating and not, or is the difference between when you have that conversation with the people in your backlog and things are falling apart and you're trying to keep it together and to close. Like everything matters more and more the more money's involved and the more performance matters. And in real estate, it matters.
Sure.
And so these are examples of things I'm looking at with people where I know money is left on the table, that if we can chip away at all these things, it makes a really big difference.
Right.
So
now,
I know that was a lot. Sorry if that's a long
No,
answer.
no, that's good insight. I like this sort of holistic approach. I mean, we do this. We do not exactly what you do, but we kind of take a holistic approach within the team that I'm on, where we discuss when we do like sort of, for example, so I work off of the 12-week year, but I still do an annual goal, and I just break it out into 12-week years, right? Or effectively quarters. And one of the things that we talk about is before we put together our business goals is like, what are our personal goals for the year? So we identify those first, and then one of the things that we talk about, and I don't know that everyone on the team does it, but one of the things that we talk about is, okay, well, what are you going to be doing for vacation? Like that's the first thing you do.
What a concept.
Yeah,
right?
like you first put your vacation on, because and then you put your layer all the other things around that, right? Because the whole purpose of life is to live life, and vacation is a part of that living, right?
What a concept. Yeah.
So and what's really cool about that is because the concern for a lot of people when they, especially when I first did it the first time, their concern was, well, I don't want to put this vacation here. What if I'm not where I need to be, and here I have this vacation planned, right? And then my partner and mentor, her name's Brandy.
Yeah, I know Brandy.
You know Brandy.
I love Brandy.
Yeah, Brandy's awesome.
I miss her. We used to catch up periodically, and I haven't seen her in forever also.
Yeah, no,
she's amazing.
She is.
I see her as like a big sister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she had mentioned to me, well, if you're not meeting your goals, then just change your vacation.
Oh man, this is a great topic.
And I was just
keep going, but I like this topic.
It just blew my mind. I was like, oh.
Yeah. You're like, you could do that?
I could just change my vacation. It just didn't dawn on me. I just assumed that it's set in stone, and it's technically supposed to be like, but it's supposed to be like it's I guess the only metaphor that I can think of is, yes, it's a stone, but it's a movable stone. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be heavy. Mm-hmm. It's not supposed to be movable. You're supposed to keep it there if you can. Mm-hmm. But if you have to move it because maybe you're behind on your goals and you don't feel like you've earned the right to have that vacation, then it's a stone. It's a heavy stone, but it's still movable. Right. And you just move it over to a place where you feel like, oh, well, I can make this stone work here, and then I'll just have to work through this time frame here, right? I'm not going to be able to leave it there. I'm going to have to move it over a little bit, right? So
I like that. I think that's a good analogy.
Yeah,
with the stone, that makes sense.
So I just thought that was like, that just like blew my mind. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that. I mean, obviously that can be challenging if you're like planning a trip to Europe or something like that. But I mean, I feel like if you're planning that kind of trip, you're probably in a pretty decent place anyways. You know what I'm saying?
Hopefully.
Like where you got to plan for something like months in advance, like you're probably in a decent enough place where if you had to go, that your business is probably going to be okay anyways.
Right.
And that was another thing that kind of got to me too, was like, well, what if you're not meeting your goals and then you go on this vacation? I was like, yeah, that's a problem. She's like, well, is it? And I was just like, well, what do you mean? Well, she was like, well, is it really?
It's like, but Brandy, I'll starve to death in Madrid. I won't have money for a baguette.
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, is that a problem? We're like, I think so. If I die, it's a problem.
Yeah. So, but she was, but the idea was that, me being out for a week or two, like how much really is that going to impact if I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to, or if I know that I'm behind and I have to just adjust for it. So I'm either adjusting enough that I can work around the stone that's there, or I'm so behind that I'm going to have to make the sacrifice of moving the stone. And the stone is heavy. So that means that it may be that I may have to lose something, whether that's time with my family or that's money that I spent, or both. Right. Because it's urgent enough that I have to work through my business. But I've at least put that stone there as a marker to say, I'm going to prioritize my vacation as much as I possibly can, unless I absolutely have to move it. Right. So that was just really kind of a game changer for me. So now, like, my wife and I, we talk about like, well, what are we doing in June? what are we doing in October of next year? Like, we're talking in those terms, and it's really cool to kind of be planning for those things. And sometimes we've had to make some minor adjustments, right? Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's her because of the business that she's in, and sometimes it's been me. Most of the time we don't, though. We kind of set the time. There's a time, and sometimes like I'm maybe a little short of my goal, but I'm long enough to be like, you know what, I can get away with still having this vacation, right? And then when I get back, I'm like refreshed and revitalized, and then all of a sudden, like, my brain is just working better, right? So I know that it has a positive impact. You know?
Man, there's so many good things that you said that I have like thoughts in my head as you were talking. I like the stone analogy. I agree with the stuff you said. I'm trying to think of kind of where to start with the thoughts that were popping into my head as you were talking. But I think with the goals, goals sound so boring. I think people are like, goals. Like, I know I need goals. Like, first of all, there's a great quote. I never know who to attribute it to, but it's like, if you don't do it, you don't know it.
Yeah.
And people do not set goals. The reason they don't set goals is the same reason they don't go to the gym. It's fucking hard.
Yeah.
It takes work to do it. It's like it takes mental energy, and we don't like to expend mental energy because we want to save our energy. So if there's a woolly mammoth that wants to come kill us, we can run away. So we don't like to spend energy. But there's a great line from Brian Tracy where he says, with goals, we write the future in advance. And I think that's really beautiful.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of true.
Yeah, that's totally true.
Another line by him is, there's no such thing as unrealistic goals, only unrealistic timelines, which is sort of talking what you're about, which I think is true. Something that's been helping me, because, when you're working with yourself, it's different from someone else, because it's like you really have to become a lot better when you're trying to get other people somewhere. You just have to understand things on a better level.
Oh, yeah.
And you're accountable, because it's like, if I don't deliver for this person, then I don't get paid and they don't get results, and that's a problem.
Yeah, what? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
But it's okay.
That actually was very evident to me when I started productivity coaching, because I'm the productivity coach for the office now, and because of that, I had to up my own accountability.
Yes.
Because I couldn't slack anymore. Like,
you need to get them results.
I got to get them results.
It's another level.
Yes.
So you have to become better, but it makes you the best version of yourself. So that's good. But what I was going to say with the goals, that it wasn't really obvious to me before, but the more I kind of worked with them and helping people with them, I see goals sort of like tools. A goal is something that should help you to get the best out of yourself.
Sure.
But it's not something that should stomp you into the ground. And it is possible sometimes that we set goals that are so high that we kind of get paralyzed, and then we do nothing, and then it's hurting us. I think of goals as sort of, like you said, they are movable. These are things to get the best out of me. And if they're not getting the best out of me, I can tweak them to do that, where I might still have the same overall picture of where I want to go.
Yeah.
But let me make this by this timeline, or instead of making this amount, let me tweak this, because then I maybe make more, because that goal brought more out of me because I adjusted it.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about this in our productivity coaching, where like, you have two options. So we do. I work to try to do a quarterly evaluation, and that's the time where we can say, this is what I like about the 12-week year. Have you seen the 12-week year? Have you read that book?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what that is. I was going to ask, but I didn't want to sound stupid.
No. It's a great
12-week year. What is that?
Yeah. So it's basically the idea that, how typically when we do our and you do like an annual planning for 2025.
Okay.
Right. So I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do my annual plan for 2025. What are my goals for 2025? Right. We do it in the course of a year. Yep. The problem is that we're really bad at predicting how we're going to perform in the future. We're just bad at it. We're really, really bad.
I relate to that.
Yeah.
It's hard.
But I mean, that's a human thing. We're just not good at predicting. It's not a thing that we're good at, but we can usually do pretty good in shorter clips. So so the 12-week year, the idea of the 12-week year is you break down, let's say, your annual goal into these quarters that all they're technically 13 weeks. So but you call it a 12-week year, and you treat the 12 weeks as your year.
Got it.
So you start with your goal for the quarter, right, which is the 12 weeks. And then you run through that 12 weeks. And then as you get to the end of the 12, when you get to the end of the 12 week, there's a 13th week that's there. That 13th week is your planning week to evaluate how you did over the last 12 weeks.
I like that.
Right?
I like that.
And then you kind of see, well, do I need to make any adjustments? And I can adjust two things. I can adjust my goals, or I can adjust my activities.
Right.
And then I go through and I say, oh, well, I wanted to get let's say 3 closings this last 12 weeks. I only got 2.
Right.
So the next 12 weeks, I can either stay with my activities or I can adjust my overall goal, right? And mean I'm going to get 1 less deal, or I can adjust my next quarter goal, my next 12-week year,
right,
and say instead of 3 deals, I'm going to go for 4 deals for this next 12 weeks. So I need to
right,
double down, right? So now I'm ratcheting up my activities to get 4 deals for the
Yes.
next quarter, so that by the time I get to that, at the end of that quarter, I can go back to my 3. I can kind of calm down a little bit and go back to just trying to get 3 again.
right.
And
Yeah.
then
It's all getting the best out of yourself.
Correct.
And it's this dance, you know, it's not, the older I get, not that I'm old, but it's like you realize how complicated life is and how nuanced it is. I mean, something I wanted to bring up too with the vacation, because I think it's there were so many great things you said in that pack of stuff. There's like, we could talk all about that, but you know, I think maybe you remember, but in 2019, I went to Barcelona, Spain.
Oh yeah.
And this was a trip that I really, really wanted to take.
Yeah.
I'd always wanted to go there. I'd heard great things. So I go there, I take 2 weeks there, and it was just so amazing.
That's awesome.
I knew nothing about Barcelona when I went there. I didn't have a place to stay for the first night, and I knew nothing about the city or the highlights. I didn't know anything about anything.
Sure.
And I just winged the entire thing. And you know, there was a time where I rented a Lamborghini Huracan for 2 hours, and I got to like drive through the mountains of Spain.
That's awesome.
It was an all-wheel drive, like drop top Spider, like
Yeah.
brand new. And I'm a huge car person. I love cars. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is because sometimes you never know how something affects something else. Like, you know, like the butterfly effect, where it's like this affected this,
Sure.
this, and like there was no way we ever could have known
chaos
that.
theory.
Yeah. And so Barcelona, so I come back to Orlando, and you might remember this moment, but I filmed this video called Invisible Risk. That was, I don't know, within a week or so, something like that, after I'd come back. And in the video, and you know, when I do these videos, they're not really planned. I just kind of have a thought, and I think maybe it might help others because it's what I'm thinking about, and it's helping me. I learn a lot about others just trying to study myself, because we're all human beings.
Yeah.
But in the video, I said that we all see the risk of putting ourselves out there and failing. You know, we lose time, we lose money, we're embarrassed. Why did I even do that? Now I'm even back further than I was, whatever. But we don't see the risk of where we're at. So it's an improper assessment of risk. And so if we're on a trajectory we don't want to be on, even if it's a good trajectory, I was on a good trajectory. You know, I was doing well money-wise, and I had like the car that I wanted, and like I had good relationships with others, and my life was good, but it wasn't really the trajectory I wanted. I didn't feel like it was completely what I was supposed to be doing, like life-wise, existential or fulfillment-wise or whatever.
Sure.
I didn't feel like I was doing what I was on this earth to do. And so I thought, okay, well, if I'm on a path that I don't want to be on, and I continue on that path, then not only is that also risky, but I'm guaranteed to fail. So it's like, now we've got these two things. I could go for it meaning maybe how I really want things to be going, and have a chance, or I could be guaranteed to fail. And when I thought about it that way, I was like, I got to quit my job. I was like, I got to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had like a little prayer moment that night where I was like, God, like, is this a good idea?
Yeah.
And then January 1st, 2020, which was like a month and a half later, was the date I chose to quit. But I might not have had that insight if I hadn't gone to Barcelona and had those experiences and enjoyed that so much. So all these categories matter, and it's hard for us to understand how they matter, and it's hard for us to understand how they affect each other.
Yeah.
But that was just a moment, since we were talking about vacation, that I wanted to share, because I didn't know that was going to do that.
Right.
But that was a catalyst for that.
For sure. I mean,
you know what I mean?
But that goes back into this idea of live the idea of living, like what that really means, right? Like when you have the ability, and this is why I think, doing your best to take time away for yourself is important, is because those kinds of experiences, they have such a huge impact. It allows you to have a sort of a different perspective on life, right? Like driving in the mountains in a Lamborghini in Barcelona, like that is a life experience.
Right.
That's a unique life experience, whatever it is.
And it still brings me joy now. Like I think of it, I'm like, man, that was so cool.
Yeah. So that's cool, right? And it doesn't have to be that, right? It doesn't have to be this, I traveled to Europe and I was in Madrid or wherever, Barcelona or wherever I was, right? It doesn't have to be a European trip. It could just be time for yourself, right? And I think that has an impact because it allows you to sort of reevaluate like what is going on in your life and what direction you're wanting to go into. Your point. I love the idea of like, if you're going in a trajectory that you don't, even though there is quote unquote success that's happening, but it's not the direction that you want to go, is that really like how that is ultimately failure, because the way that you define life is not like the way that you define success in your life is not that trajectory.
Right.
Like, even though that sort of fits, it checks the boxes of what other people outside see.
Yes.
Because they see, oh, he has a car and he's making good money and he has this nice house and he's got great friends and whatever. But if it's not the trajectory, if that's not where the direction that you want to go, then that is ultimately failure. And that's counterintuitive, I think, because most people would assume.
Because we don't like to be outside norms, and we don't like to be outside the group, because that's scary. It's one of the scary things about and we're kind of pack animals. Like you don't see one zebra chilling. There's all the zebra or whatever the plural is.
I think it's zebra. I think zebra is a self plural.
I think it is. But you're asking about the mistakes of business owners, and again, we're all making tons of mistakes all the time, including me. But I think that one of the big mistakes is that they go off, and I'm sure you see this in real estate all the time. It's like you go into real estate. Gosh, there's so many different things. To real estate because there's a certain life you want, and you want time and money to create that. Mm-hmm. But then it's weird how it happens, where it's like anything which is 100% commission, sales, entrepreneurship, your own business, anything that's like that, you're sort of playing like this infinite game where it's like there's always more to do. Mm-hmm. And so what ends up happening to people is it's like, if there's always more to do and you're kind of a type A personality, or however you want to say that, then you just keep doing and doing. And then it's like they had some ideas of how they wanted their life to go, and they thought that the business was going to create that. But then it's like everything is sacrificed for the business, and life kind of just keeps going and going, and they just kind of keep not attending to these things. So the way that I find it helpful to explain to them is like, hey man, even if all we cared about was money, which we don't, but even if because high performing people, they understand money. If you can put things in terms of like, you're going to make more money and this is how it's going to work, then they're like, okay, cool, we'll do it.
Yeah.
So it's like, once they begin to understand, even if all we cared about was money, me, for example, dancing salsa every day, I believe that makes my career better.
Yeah.
Because, and it sounds like it's not related, but let's put it in a context. I go dance salsa every day. I'm filled up. I like who I am. I like how the world looks around me. I go out. I have a different amount of energy. I bring that into the meeting. Contract comes out of it. Money. Right. So it's like we have a hard time doing that. But I think that's a big thing business people do is just thinking there's everything else. And there's always more business to do. So it's like, well, I guess I'll just only work.
I mean, look, this is actually, I think, one of the challenges for business owners, because we do have a culture in this country of like growth is everything, right?
Business growth.
Yeah, business growth is everything, right?
Yeah,
business
not personal growth.
Yeah, not personal growth. Business growth is everything, right? If you're not growing, you're failing.
More employees.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah, how many employees do you have? Yeah.
So I think that, we have a culture of like, we just have to keep figuring out a way to grow. And I mean, you know what, for some people, maybe that fulfills them, right?
Like Gary Vee, he's happy working 15 hours a day.
Yes.
What percentage of the population is happy working 15 hours a day? Very little.
Yeah, very few.
He's an anomaly.
Yeah.
But everybody's doing that. It's like, for me, right? I would be happy dancing salsa like 4 or 5 hours a day.
Yeah.
For someone else, that would be like the dumbest thing ever.
Right.
So it's like, but people don't understand that. I
think. One of the things, and I'm trying to remember who it was who shared this with me, and I cannot remember for the life of me. But one of the things that we kind of made some adjustments on was identifying like, what would it cost to live a lifestyle that would just make us happy, for my wife and I. And we started,
I've heard these too.
Yeah. So
where it's like nowhere near what we think it is.
Yeah, it's nowhere near. Like
we have to make like $20 million per
Yeah.
year minimum. And it's like, nah,
so
man,
like
that's not the number.
No, it's not. Like we went through some numbers and we're like, okay, well, realistically, like, and we're like balls to the wall, like the things that we want to do. We like to travel. We like to hike and bike,
The campers and other,
stuff like that.
I remember you telling me about
Yeah,
it.
so and we're like, if we wanted to travel all the time, and so we're like, okay, well, how much is that going to cost?
Yep.
With all the we have
realistically,
bills. Yeah, realistically, what would it cost for us to just have that lifestyle?
Yeah.
And then we did the numbers, and the numbers was like, oh, well, if we made like $95,000 a year between the both of us, $95,000 a year. If we had $95,000 a year between the both of us,
that's pretty doable.
That's totally doable.
That's like a reasonable goal.
I'm like, we could live the lifestyle that we wanted, and I was just like, what? Like, I was just like, I couldn't. There's no way. And then I did the numbers again, and I'm like, yeah, well, this and that.
So to piggyback off that, because I love that, and I have heard that before. I don't know where to attribute that credit to either.
Yeah.
Because sometimes so many people have said something you don't know where it's from.
Yeah.
But what was it I was about to say? Oh yeah, I think this is another quote. I don't know if it's a Tony Robbins quote or something, but it's like most ideas are like born dead or whatever. It's like you have the idea and it dies.
Yeah.
So, we think that certain things that for us sound so unrealistic that we won't even let ourselves think it, let alone write it. But the funny thing about life, and this is the same thing that you were just saying, is like, you can't reverse engineer nothing. But once you've got something, you start to reverse engineer it and you're like,
yeah,
that actually sounds semi-doable.
Yeah.
And then no such thing as unrealistic goals, only unrealistic timelines. It's like, well, might not be doable in 6 months, but it might be doable in 3 years or 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's always amazing to me how doable things are. I'm not someone that says like everything is so easy and you get it instantaneously with no work. Like I'm not someone that likes to talk that way.
Yeah.
But I do think that we're closer to things we want than we think, meaning we think that that's absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
And maybe we're 1, 3, 5 years out or less.
But that's hard for people. Right?
Really hard.
It's really hard for people to think
hard.
in that scale, to be like, oh, well, in 5 years, I can be XYZ or I can be doing XYZ, because people assume that, oh, well, in 5 years, I should be a millionaire. But for what? Why? Like, why is that important to you to be a millionaire? Right? Because a lot of times people don't even have an answer for that. Like, I'll ask people all the time, part of what we do is we sit down and we have like our goal setting for the, what they want to do in their first year. And I always get, oh, well, I want to make $100,000 a year.
That's like the famous
number
line. Yeah. For your first year.
Yeah,
I want to make $100,000.
I want to make $100,000. Okay. Well, what's important about that? And then crickets. I always get crickets. They're like, well, it just seems like the right number to go
and
for.
This is the calls that you would have to make. Are you willing to do that? No, not
well, usually they say yes. Usually they
might say
they
yes.
Won't necessarily
they won't do it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, but usually, it's like, okay, well, are you currently working right now? Yes, I am. Okay, so you're going to be doing 2 careers at the same time. Yes. Okay, so you want to make $100,000 a year in your first year of real estate, and you have another job, and you're going to be doing, and that's a full-time job, and you're going to be doing this sort of like a side hustle,
and you have no sales experience,
right? So so then most of the time, so I'm like, why don't we try to figure out how to, like, what if we just got rid of your job? Would that make sense? And then that it just like doesn't like they're like, oh, like I would love to get them. Well, how much do you make? Oh, well, I make $50,000 a year. Well, what if we cover that $50,000? Oh, well, that would be great. Well, okay, why don't we try to get rid of the $50,000 and make you that? And then now you're in a position to be able to say, if you can side hustle $50,000, right, and just squirrel that away in your bank. If you had $50,000 in your bank account, would you then be willing to like quit your job, and now you have a whole year's worth of salary that you can just live off of while you try to build your real estate career? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, like you can do that? Like, yeah, like that's way more doable, because it's not this sort of just this random number that they pulled out of the sky because I feel like I should be making 6 figures and $100,000 is the first 6-figure number that exists.
Well, and I agree with all those things. I think that I think that people don't realize the amount of clarity we have for it to click in our brain and get like the power of our brain working for us.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like the difference between saying like, I want to make a lot of money in real estate and I want to make, you know, $100,000 by October 20th, 2025.
Right.
It's like something clicks and you're like, oh, I got it.
Yeah,
I got it. And our mind is like so insanely strong when it's clear, but it's really not that good when it's not. Or like, I want to lose weight versus I want to lose, you know, 20 pounds by January 12th.
Right.
2025.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, click, we got it.
Specificity matters. Yeah.
Yeah, it matters. I think with the goal setting and the clarity too, you know, little kids, they know how to dream. You know, they know how to dream and they know how to let their mind wander. But as we become adults, we get, you know, kind of cynical.
Yeah, totally.
And I think the biggest thing with why people don't know what they want is the second they have the thought, they're thinking too much about the how. They're like, well, I don't really know how I'd go about doing that. That doesn't seem very realistic. I don't even know where I would start. I'm not really that type of person. I've never really been that type of person, you know, and it's just all of this, like, it is not clear to me how I would get there. So no.
Yeah.
And we sort of already said this, but what I find is like one of the biggest ways to help people with clarity, and clarity is like such a giant freaking topic, is you have to get them to sort of temporarily suspend the thoughts of how would they go about getting there. It's just like, fuck that for now. For now, all we're going to figure out, Brian Tracy has this exercise of like, what would your life look like? It's perfect in every way and impossible to fail. You write for like 15 minutes as fast as you can and you don't stop. And you're not editing yourself. So all this stuff is coming out and you keep doing this exercise and you keep seeing what comes out when you don't edit. So we have to know what that is. And the easiest way to figure out what that is to sort of just crank it out without thinking and start to see what reoccurring themes come. And just for now, suspend the how. Yeah. Because like we said, we can go back and reverse engineer it, but we've got to have it. And so I think when you sort of work with adults and you allow them to dream and you say, hey, yeah, the how matters, I know. But for this exact moment, we're going to say, fuck that.
Yeah.
And then people can sort of be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I don't want this. Now I would want this. Now I would want this.
Yeah.
So I think that's where people get stuck with the clarity part, is like, it just doesn't sound realistic to them. It's like, I understand.
Yeah.
But let's just put that aside for now, not forever.
Yeah.
Because people get freaked out about putting that aside. You're like, what do you mean put that aside? It's like, just for now.
Yeah.
And it helps a lot.
I would agree with that. I mean, one of the things that, and I know that there's been studies on this, but, you know, as humans, no is a defense mechanism. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're taught that from a child. It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, they love the word. No.
Well, the thing is that like they learn that from their parents, right? Because their parents are usually telling them no all the time. And that's true. Primarily for defense purposes.
Right.
No, don't touch that hot stove. No, don't put that thing in the outlet.
Your finger in the socket.
Yeah, no, don't cross into the road. Like everything is a defense mechanism, right? So we have a tendency to use no as our default answer. Like you can use no as
I like that.
Right?
I never really heard that explained that way.
Yeah,
but
so
I like that.
No is a default answer, right? It's very hard for people to say yes to things. I mean, think about that in sales. Like if you're talking to somebody, the first response for most people is no, not now. No, I'm not ready.
I'm just looking.
Leave
me alone.
Yeah, right.
I just want to see the model.
Yeah, exactly, right? So everything tends to be no. That's a defense mechanism, right? So
and it's a knee-jerk reaction defense mechanism. It's like, how are you doing? Good. It's just it just happens immediately.
It happens immediately, right? So for someone to say yes to something, usually yes requires you to have to analyze and say, is this something that I want? Yes, I do want this. Okay, I'm good to move forward. I have to analyze this, but you don't have to do that for no. Right.
No is safer.
No is a safe place.
So you kind of have to be vulnerable.
Yes.
Because you're like, yeah, I like her. I like that girl.
Correct.
Oh shit, what do I do now?
Right.
And we don't like it's probably a Tony Robbins line. I don't remember what it is, but it's like we always feel that need to stay consistent with who we say we are.
Yeah.
This is, by the way, I've seen very high performing people. They don't like to write stuff down, like the goals. I'm like, dude, we got to write it down. And I have to like pull them like, no, man, just trust me. We're writing this shit down.
Yeah.
And I think the reason they don't like it, and one of the reasons writing stuff down is so powerful. I mean, one is clarity, but another is that when we write something down, we're saying this is who we are.
Yeah.
And so if we don't do that, it means, just kidding, I'm not who I say.
I'm fraudulent.
And we hate that.
Yeah.
We hate that feeling. And so I don't know why I thought of that, the writing things down, but.
Yeah. No, but the whole idea here is at least
the no and the yes, the vulnerability and the right. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries.
I just got lost of why.
But I think that's the reason why I think people tend to say no to things immediately, right? Yeah. Is that's their initial defense is a defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. So it takes a minute for them to have a willingness to say yes to that. But the thing that people don't realize is that regardless of whether you say yes or no to one thing, right? Yes, I'm going to have this cup of coffee. That's going to sacrifice something, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Me saying yes to this coffee means that I'm not going to have water. I'm going to have coffee, mm-hmm. right? So I've said no to water. I've said yes to coffee, mm-hmm. right? So the fact that you said yes to come to this podcast from 8:30 until about 9:30 means that you said no to whatever else you would have done. Sleeping. Yeah, between 8:30 and 9:30, right? Yeah. So by making a decision, whether it's yes or no, so if you said no to something, it's the same thing. That means that you're saying yes to something else. So the question then becomes like, well, what things are most important for you to say yes to if yes is going to bring you forward in life, in the world, and so on and so forth? You know what I mean?
Dude, there's a lot of really interesting things you're saying, and I've had like a lot of thoughts on recently that I'm trying to sort out recently.
Sure.
So one of them, I guess we could just talk in what comes to our heads, but one of the things that I've been thinking recently is, I'm sure you've heard that quote of like, what you say no to is just as important as what you say yes to.
Absolutely.
Right. But what I was thinking of, I was like, you know what? That's not quite right. Let's say the 80-20 rule, right? More like 90-10. So 90% of results coming from 10% of the things we do.
Yeah.
So if that's true, let's put that within the context of no and yes. Let's say there's 100 things. That means that 90 of the things you should be saying no to, and 10% and 10 of the things you should be saying yes to. So it's not actually that saying no is just as important as yes. It's actually way more important, because those were 90 different times that you could have gone off wherever the fuck
you tangent.
Yeah, instead of, so it's actually way more important because we're not saying yes to that much stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I was thinking about that recently.
Okay. Yeah,
it's way more important.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Because it's way more common.
Oh, yeah.
If we're just like, yes, then now we're really screwed.
Yeah, we're totally, you won't get anywhere. Yeah. If you said yes to everything, you won't do anything.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to identify the things. It goes back to like this idea of focus, right? Gary Keller wrote the book, The One Thing.
Mm-hmm. I read it.
And the idea of like, if you're trying to do everything, like you're never going to get anything done. So focus on like the one thing that's going to have the largest impact in this case, your business, but you can do it in your life or whatever. What's the one thing you can do that is going to have the biggest impact in your life, in your business or life or whatever.
Both.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the same idea. Like, what's the one thing that you want to say yes to that's going to be most impactful, right? So, who was it? I can't remember who was. There's a number of people who have said this, and I can't remember the last person I heard it said from. But one of the things that I've heard some high performing just individuals say, and not me personally meeting them, but just on TV or in videos or whatever, is that they learned how to say no more often. So our default is already no. Mm-hmm. And then they went through the process of saying, oh, I'm not saying no enough. Mm-hmm. So I got to say yes less often so that I can be more successful. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, there's a 20-80 rule, but really, is it really 20-80? Maybe it is 10-90. That's where we should be.
Or maybe even more.
Or even more, right? So we should really be focusing on like the things that we're going to say yes to are the things that we can really devote enough time that it's going to actually move the needle in our life.
But what's one of the things that's I agree with everything you said. I think one of the things that's so hard about that is if you don't know your outcomes, if you don't have clarity, which almost nobody does.
Yeah.
And this has nothing to do with how smart you are, how much money you make.
Yeah.
You could make a shit ton of money and have no clue how you want your life to be going.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because like we said, it's specialized knowledge and it's putting in the work.
Yeah.
But you can't know what you should say no to and what you should say yes to if you don't know what you're basing it off of.
That's true.
So it sort of puts people in a tough spot. It's like, I don't know if I should say no or yes. It's like, yeah, well, no shit.
Yeah, you don't even know where you're going.
Yeah. There was something else that you were talking about, like the water versus the coffee. That was an example where you were assessing both sides. but usually we don't. So here's something I've been seeing with business owners recently, and I'm glad I thought of this because I think this is something that will speak to people, and I think it's really common. So let's say something like a high ticket item, right? Coaching, I mean, I guess not everybody it's a high ticket item, but it can be a very high ticket
for sure
item. And it can also sort of feel like an elective thing. And whenever something is elective and high ticket, it's sort of like,
yeah, I'm not sure if I want to do that.
I don't know if it's the right time because I'm paying off this or I'm paying off that, or I'm not really profitable right now and I'm kind of draining cash, or, I've heard lots of different reasons, and they're all good reasons. And I'm not saying you should always spend money on coaching. I mean, if you're going to be bankrupt in 90 days, I might be that it's better to keep that money. So I'm not one of those people that's like, you should always, no matter what.
Right.
But what I've been seeing people do is they'll be like, oh, that sounds like something I'm interested in. But then the next thing they will say, and I'm not pushing it on them, but the next thing they will say is like, what is it? Usually it's for money reasons, right? So they are back to like the coffee and the water. They're seeing that and they're saying, yeah, that looks valuable, but it has a cost. No. And they're not assessing both sides. So you talked about the coffee and the water. I'll choose coffee. Most people don't do that. They just look at one and say yes or no. So let's say there's cost to coaching. Cool. What is the cost to not doing it? Let's make sure that we compare both costs and then let's make the right decision.
Right.
So, a lot of times in life we're choosing between shitty decisions. You might not want to pay for coaching, but you also don't like the situation you're in. So what are all the pros and cons of both, and how problematic are both? And if they go on the trajectories, how does this play out?
Right.
And so this is a blind spot that business owners have. And I'm not saying that they should always invest in something for their business or their personal life. Maybe they shouldn't, so there's a lot to take into account.
Yeah.
But it's like, make sure you're looking at both sides, because if you're only looking at the fact that that's expensive, it's not a matter of this expensive. You've got two expensive things.
Yeah.
The expensive of doing this and the expensive of not. It might be that this is worse, but just make sure that you know.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, a lot of times this is way more expensive than people are calculating because of the clarity. Like you said, you sit down with those people, you think it through, they don't really realize where they stood.
Yeah.
A lot of times these business owners, you think it through. Okay, how problematic is this trajectory that I'm on? But they don't think it through. And it's a major blind spot, and it is a dangerous and an expensive blind spot.
Oh, for sure. Like the expense of not taking action on a problem that currently exists that's causing you havoc. That can be a very expensive.
And they both suck.
Yeah.
A lot of times in life people don't talk about it that much, but a lot of times we're choosing between shitty situations. Like, well, I don't want to do that. Okay, cool. Where are we at? We don't want to do that either. Okay, cool. What is our outcome? It's this. Okay, cool. What is the best decision that gets us there? Probably this. Well, I don't want to do this. Okay, cool. Well, what do you want to do? I want to do this. Okay, well, it's like bringing people back to like, let's just think the whole thing through.
Yeah.
A lot of times we're choosing between things that we don't want to do, but we have to try to pick the best choice we can.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to make sure we analyze both sides.
Well, what's interesting.
And I probably make this mistake too.
Of course. Yeah, we all do. I mean, it's not unique to everyone else and not us. Right.
Right.
I think that sometimes you have to take, and oftentimes I think this happens, and it's very difficult because we have a culture of growth only mindset. And sometimes
How do you mean growth only mindset?
Like I have to grow my business consistently.
Oh, okay.
There's anything that I do that's not growing my business is a problem. Not realizing that sometimes you might have to put a pause on that growth, take a step back. And even it may mean that you might have a down quarter or maybe a down 2 quarters to take a step back so that you can launch forward exponentially.
Yeah. And I would say that is growing.
Oh, absolutely. But that's not how it's perceived.
Right.
It's not perceived as growing because they're like, oh, but that means that for the next 2 quarters, I'm going to be down.
Well, here's another. Oh, there's so many good things we're talking about right now. Yes, I get what you're saying. I think that is still growing. I think a huge mistake that I made in my business over these past number of years was that I was always so short-term kind of transactional. Not transactional, like treating people in a transactional way, but short-term transactional, like I had to make money right now or I'm screwed.
Yeah.
But that wasn't always necessarily the best long-term business strategy because I wasn't necessarily taking the highest quality actions for the big picture to build what I wanted.
Gotcha.
And so I really think that what you mentioned is really good, and people are scared to kind of slow down and see the big picture of like, how do I want this whole thing to go? And then what should I do now? We're sort of like, I gotta survive,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, this happened to me in my business because I had, when I first started real estate, one of the things I was really interested in is I really wanted to get into commercial real estate. I had looked at it and I was like, this is something I really want to get into, but I didn't have the ability because commercial real estate has such a long learning curve and it's a sales cycle, right? There's all kinds of elements of it that are just really complicated.
Networking, like you have to know the people.
Yeah. So it's just different, right? It's a different business, but I knew that I wanted to get into it. And I was like, well, at the time, I didn't have the means to be able to take that sacrifice, to take that hit.
Right.
And I was like, well, let me just go into residential. I'll learn about residential. And then as I'm in residential, I'll start learning about commercial. And then maybe I can transition over.
Right.
And I started essentially I did that for many years. And then I was like, okay, I want to start doing commercial. So I started working on some commercial deals, right? I had I usually would partner with somebody or something like that. And about 6 months in, I was just like, it was too difficult for me to do both residential and commercial because they're two different businesses.
That's what I hear.
Like it was so hard. Like I couldn't keep track of stuff. Stuff was falling through the cracks. And I was just like, there's no way I can do this. Like if I'm going to do commercial, I got to be all in on this. Like I can't half-ass, or I can't side hustle commercial real estate. I just can't. Right. There's just no way for me. Right. So I had to make a decision at the time. I was like, okay, well, what could I do? And I looked at all my different options. I was like, I had an option that became apparent to me where it would allow me, I had to borrow money, but it would allow me to basically use that borrowed funds to be able to sustain, some income for about a year or so, in order for me to not have to do residential and focus fully on commercial. But the other thing that I also had to do is if I was going to do that, I was like, well, if I'm going to do that, I need to commit to having like a mentor that will help me catapult my business so that at the end of the year, I actually have a business, because I only have about a year's worth of borrowing to be able to do that. And I was highly leveraged. I was not comfortable in that position, but I knew that was going to be the way to get me into commercial. Yeah. And I took that step back, which was not a comfortable place for me. It was not a comfortable place for my wife. Right. It was really challenging. But I knew that if I did that, I would be in a way different place in a year. And I knew how I performed. So I was like, okay, I just know that if I'm going to do this, I got to make sure that I'm putting everything in place so that I can be in a good place in a year. Right. And then by the end of that year, I'm hoping that I can have a couple of deals in place that it'll pay off my debts, and I can kind of be moving forward. Right. And it was tenuous at best. And and we had there were 3 deals that I was working with this mentor with, and we were splitting deals and stuff like that and all that good stuff. And, it wasn't until this, it was a deal for I think it was 1.8 million or something like that. And we ended up having both sides of the deal. So it was a nice chunky chunk of money that was coming. And I didn't, and it was still on the table, not on the table, whatever. Anyways, we finally got to the closing table, and I got this, there was a chunk of money that I was about to get paid on. And I was like, wow. But then I was like, oh, but I got to pay off all these debts. But I was able to, from that one deal, I was able to pay off the debt that I had for the whole year. Now it left me with $7,000 or something like that. Yeah, right? Still. But I paid off my debt, and then I was back to square one. But now I have a business, and I was just like, okay, I can totally do this. And then I just started picking up steam from there. So that made a huge, that was a huge movement for me. But that was really difficult because psychologically, my ego was like, what the hell are you doing? You're you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do know what you're saying.
And I'm scrapping, I'm here, scrapping for food, and I'm eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and people are like, hey, you want to go out to this place? And I'm like, no, I
don't. Hey, man, we got this VIP booth. Yeah,
like,
nah, bro.
No, I'm good. I'm going to be home.
I can't even afford to go into the bathroom and tip $1 for that. Yeah, you know what, man? It's funny because I really relate to that story. And I think in terms of like the going backwards or taking a step to the side or whatever, I guess it's just this like step backwards according to who.
Yeah.
Because it might be a step backwards according to other people. Yeah. But it might be step forwards according to us. And so it's still a step forward. So you know, I was doing well at KB Home. And I think if I stayed, I'd have continued to do well. I probably would have gone to like DR Horton because of people there who've made a lot of money. But I had different people at KB Home that I was, for the most part, selling just as well as, who went other places and made, you know, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 in a year. And so I think I could have done something like that. Not to take anything away from them because they're good salespeople, but I think I was just as good as them and I could have done it. Yeah. And so, but at KB Home, let's say maybe I made like a little under like 200,000, like 175 or whatever it was. And you know, that was 4.5, almost 5 years ago. So let's say 200,000 times 5 is $1 million. Yeah. So let's say I've left like $1 million on the table. I had to sell my car, my Corvette, which I loved, which made me really sad. I'm not happy about that. Right. You know, I went into a shit ton of debt, you know, credit card debt to family, you know, losing all my money in my checking account. There was a time where I was doing delivery for Domino's. There was a time where I was selling cars at Lexus. There's a time where I was doing Uber. Yeah. You know, there was a time where I was only charging $150 a session, and I was charging by the session, and I would work so hard to get a client, and they just drop, and this huge drop off after one session. Yeah. So it's like, imagine selling a fucking house and making $150. It's like, what the fuck are you going to do with that? So, you know, it has not been this easy journey. You know, my health has been affected, you know, mentally and physically. You know, I haven't had a vacation in 5 years. You know, so it's 1,000 times harder than people make it seem like. But I do like, I've left an enormous amount on the table. I've lost things that are important to me. I've gone into all this debt. I've put myself in all these situations. So sometimes it's like, how much pain are you willing to take? Yeah. And how long are you willing to lose for? And I don't think most people have the appetite for that. Yeah. But I can tell you that even in those worst times, I feel more successful than I would feel if I went back to new home sales and had my car and was making a bunch of money. Yeah. Because at least I know I'm going for it. Right. You know, there's my favorite definition of success that I've heard is from Earl Nightingale, where he says success is the pursuit of a worthy ideal. And that's basically what I'm helping people to do. Sure. And I love that because I think that's where confidence, self-esteem, fulfillment, I think all of that comes from that. And so you might be broke as shit, but if you feel like you're on the path that God has for you, your pain tolerance gets really fucking high. Oh, for sure. So I relate to the pain. Oh yeah. People don't talk enough about it, of share of like, hey man, like, this is what I had to go through. Oh yeah. I don't think people want to go through that. That sounds crazy. No, it is. I mean, you know, to especially when you're not, for example, if you're not used to being in debt and you're not used to having, you know, money issues, or you're not, you know, having to think about, like, I had to, during that window, I was doing like the food delivery for, what is it, the Uber Eats, picking up Uber, whatever I could to pick up extra cash. And you were grateful for that. Yeah. You're like, shit, man, I need this $5. Yeah, for sure. Like $5 is a lot of money sometimes. Yeah. So, you know, but that's, you know, that's the thing that I think you have to identify, like, what are you willing to sacrifice to get the things that you want? Yeah. You know, and for most people, the answer is very little. Yeah. So for me, I don't have a large want. With the biggest thing I want. So we identified, for example, like what we need to make, $95,000 a year. Yeah. Right? Doable. So I was like, okay, well, how can we, well, then I started saying, okay, well, how can I make $95,000 a year and both of us not having to work? Like, where maybe it's only me working, which
I'm already doing that. But then like, can I work less so that I can be more free to go do other things? Like, is there ways that things that I can leverage so that I have more, I don't want to call it passive income, but I don't have to be as involved as I am now in all the income that I'm making, right? If there's a way for me to be less involved where I can leverage some things out and maybe, and I can still be making about $100,000 a year where I'm leveraged out, not financially, but using through partners.
Different mediums.
Yeah. Then that would give us the ability and the freedom to be able to kind of live the lifestyle that we want. So I'm trying right now, what I'm engineering, right? I'm reverse engineering, saying, okay, we know how much we need to make. We know what we want to do. Like, how can I reverse engineer that so that I can be leveraged out? Because I don't necessarily want to stop working. I just don't necessarily want to have to work as much as I do. Right. So how can I reverse engineer my scenario so that I can work, a little bit? I can work the amount that I'm comfortable with and still be able to go on, travel trips and hiking and biking and do all the things that I want to do, with my family. Like, how can I do that? And really, I don't have to make a ton of money. I just need to make it more passively. That's kind of like the way that I'm kind of figuring out. So instead of me trying to I'm trying to make $1 million a year, like, no, I'm trying to make $100,000 a year with the least amount of work.
And chill in the wilderness.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Yeah. So how can I make that happen? And that's kind of
that's good that you know that, because I don't know what percentage of people I would guess have that much clarity of all the things you just said, but maybe like 5% or 2%. Like, most people, it's hard, man. The clarity is the hard part, because the reverse engineer is just sort of thinking things through, but like allowing yourself to dream and kind of trying to have that self-awareness of like, what am I on this earth for? What brings me joy? What do I know about myself? This is another interesting thing. It's like, we have to know about ourselves to know how we should structure our day. So for me, things I know about myself: I love to dance salsa. I love cars. I love to create content, so there's just, I'd love to be married one day. I love kids. I'd love to have a bunch of kids. And so I sort of know a lot of things about myself, even though there's a lot of things I don't know about myself.
Sure.
But that I can know how I would go about setting up an ideal day, week, month, year, life, because I know there's these certain things that speak to me where I'm in flow. So it's good that you have the awareness, but you've put in the work. All this stuff is work, like going to the gym, like sitting down and being like, how do I want this shit to go? Mapping it out, like, it's hard. It takes work. Same way lifting weights.
And it's usually messy, right? Like, so even when you try to map things out, there's going to be a whole bunch of parts that you're like, I don't know how I'm going to make that happen or how I'm going to make that happen. But let me at least work on the things that I can get this far. And then when I get there, I'll I'll see if maybe I can figure out how to get to the next point. Because sometimes it's also like, there's the 5-year plan, and then we're bad at predicting how we're going to be able to perform over time. So but I don't need to make the 5-year plan happen today. What I need to do is I need to figure out, like, if I can figure out like the steps prior to, and I can figure out, well, what do I need to do in the next 12 weeks? Then that's what makes sense for me. I can do that because I know in the next 12 weeks, if I can close so many deals, then I'm going to make this amount of money. I can save this money to the side, and then I'll have a little nest egg to be able to do the next thing, which is I want to buy a commercial piece of property. Right. So we have some residential assets, and then we want to convert that into commercial assets. And then the commercial assets will generate some additional cash flow for us. Which, if we have enough of those, then we'll be able to cash flow through a couple commercial assets. We'll be able to, hopefully I'll have a business running. I have my coaching going. I'll have a couple things that I'll be able to kind of leveraged out, and I'll have a little bit of a team. Like, that's how I'm kind of thinking that through. You know what I mean? Like, how can I kind of make that, how can I move things around to make that work? So I don't have the ability to buy the commercial asset now. So I'm not at that point. Right. So I want to figure out, well, how can I need to generate enough income to then be able to put that away, to squirrel that away over time. And then even if I don't do that this quarter or next quarter or the following quarter, if I do it long enough, like you said, the timeline you're talking about, we don't necessarily, it's not about, is the goal doable? It's really about the timeline. If I do it over a long enough time frame, I will eventually be in a place where I'll be able to go ahead and make that move.
I know. I like that. And that makes sense. And I think a couple of things that are popping into my head of the things you were saying. You know, there's a great line by Brian Tracy. I've quoted him a number of times, but he has a number of quotable lines.
Yeah.
He says, "You'll always know the next step." And that's been really powerful for me because people don't think that they will know what to do. And so they don't do stuff. But like you said, you don't have to know the next 5 years. Like, do I know maybe what to do today?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, sort of like, okay, cool. You know,
let's work on that. Right.
Yeah. Like you'll always know the next step. I think of life a little bit like a treasure hunt, you know, where it's like you start and then your first step is to get to the first checkpoint, and you go to the first checkpoint and it's like, go to the waterfall. And now you've got this new information. You go to the waterfall. It's like, go to the mountains.
Yeah,
and it's like with each action we take, we're getting new data. Like I feel like being an entrepreneur, not that I consider myself a business coach or expert, but it feels like being a scientist where like you have a hypothesis and you're like, I think if I do this, this will go well. And then you try and it partly works and partly not. And you keep taking these actions and you keep adjusting. But I think it's really a more messy process than people make it sound like. And I think that planning and strategy, one of the things that I've learned is like, we're sort of constantly tweaking and adjusting our plans and strategies because we have these ideas of what might work, and we read books and we find the best templates, and maybe we find mentors and we try to get the best templates we can. But there's still this process of like just shifting through stuff and sort of like wandering around in the dark, kind of like crawling, like trying to figure out all this stuff. So I think seeing it as more of a fluid process of the goals, the plans, the strategy, it's like we're always tweaking them the best we can.
Yeah.
But it's not as clean as people makes it sound of like, well, now we're going to make a plan and it's going to be this perfect plan and it's going to be like this. It's like, that's not what I find.
Well, you know, it's funny like that you say that. Like I love the idea that, you know, that it's fluid, and it has to be because like the great philosopher said, you know, it's great. How does he say it? I think he says, it's great to have a plan until you get punched in the face.
Oh, yeah. Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson, right?
Yeah, the great philosopher says. Yeah, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
There you go. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's true, right? You got to, once you get punched in your face, you got to change your plan.
Like and you are going to get punched in the face.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you're in the boxing ring, which is sort of life.
Yeah,
man, you're going to get, life is so much more like messy and like all over the place than people make it seem. And I think entrepreneurship's that way, and happiness and fulfillment and success and, you know, building what we want to build and all these things. It's like a stumbling forward.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes time. Like I'm not a business prodigy, but I'm not stupid either.
Yeah.
And what I've been doing has taken me way more time than I thought it was going to.
Well, you know,
so it's been humbling, you know.
I don't want to take up too much of your time,
no, you're good.
But one thing that I think, and I feel like this is a really important thing to emphasize, and I've talked about, I'm sure, on other podcasts, is this idea of failure, right? Like we have a culture in this country, and I think just in general, that, you know, failure is not an option, and you know, failing is bad, and you know, you go to school, and if you fail, you get held back, and don't fail, don't get an F, don't, you know, all this stuff, right? You have this huge culture of like how terrible failure is, and what I think is that I think that is not the right approach, right? Like failure was bad when, you know, we were living tribally, and you know,
we got a spear in our forehead.
Yeah, right.
That was a bad failure.
Yeah, right, exactly. You go out and you know the lions are out there. Like, okay, that failure was life, right? But now that's not the case, right? Because we're and not to say that you can't still do stupid stuff and fail and die, but
or go to jail forever,
right? So. But failure is the way that we deal with failure now is very different, because the kinds of failures that we deal with on a more regular basis are relatively small, right? And they're actually helpful for us. You know what I'm saying?
I agree.
So the failure to understand that fire is hot, right? And then you burn yourself. Well, now you just learn that fire's hot and you don't want to touch it. You've learned something. You know, next time you're not going to touch the fire. Right? So
hopefully
you've learned something. Right? But the idea here is that failure is an opportunity to learn. And you know, in KW you hear this phrase called failing forward. Right?
I remember that phrase.
And you know, I think that's a really important ideal, because the most successful people are the people who are willing to fail the most, right?
Yeah.
They fail more than anybody else. I guarantee you, Elon Musk, probably one of the most successful people on the planet, has failed more times than he succeeded.
Absolutely.
He's just been willing to fail that many times to find that success, right? Now, obviously, he's a brilliant man. He's a genius, all that good stuff. We don't all have his brain. But my point is that he failed a lot in order to find the successes that he has, right? And if you talk to anyone who has any level of success, they'll all tell you, oh yeah, I failed all kind of times. Like they fell over themselves, they failed all kind of ways. And the thing is that success feels good, but you don't learn a lot from success. You learn way more from failure than you do from success. Success just feels good.
Yeah,
it just feels good.
The outcome. I did a process. I did a post on LinkedIn about this, where it's like everybody talks about the outcome of success. Meaning, like you said, it feels good. We're the man or woman or whatever. But nobody talks about the process of success, which is like 99% of it. It's like everything that's under the iceberg.
Yeah, which is a lot of it is just all the failures that happen to get you to there, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that, it would be great if we had a culture that really kind of built on that, like built on this idea. Because I really believe, like, as a country, because where we are, this kind of gets into sort of geopolitical stuff, but where we are in our country with our economics, we can't afford ourselves for the most part. So, this idea of bringing manufacturing back to the United States, probably not a great idea. We can't compete against India and Mexico and the Philippines. We just can't. I mean, they have people that'll work for $1 an hour, right? So we just can't compete with them. So we have to compete differently. Right. And I think entrepreneurship is the way that we can compete, because we have the know-how, the knowledge, the skill set, the resources, the infrastructure to be able to do like entrepreneurship at a and it doesn't even have to be at scale. When I say at scale, I'll say at scale for our country, but that doesn't mean at scale for each individual, because it doesn't take a lot for you to be an entrepreneur to make enough to make a living. Right. Like if every person as an entrepreneur was able to make $150,000 a year, well, from a business perspective, that's not a ton of money, right? But $150,000 a year is a great living.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, if you could figure out a way to be able to have an entrepreneurial endeavor, and you were able, or partner with someone to be able to do an entrepreneurial endeavor, which is another whole challenge in itself. But I'm just saying, and we leveraged the global market, and we were able to kind of build businesses. And our country was known as being a country of entrepreneurs. I think that would have a huge impact in our ability to sustain our economy over time and solve a lot of challenges that we're dealing with economically, right? So I'd love to see that. But in order for us to do that, we have to have a culture that allows us to be more comfortable with this idea of failure.
Yeah.
Like, we just have to have a culture that says it's okay to fail. Actually, as a matter of fact, it's probably a good idea for you to fail. You learn from it and then you get better.
I think with the failure, I agree with you. And I think that it's always such a big topic. When you hear all these successful people, a lot of them say, oh, my biggest regret is that I wouldn't have been so afraid of failing for so much of my life or whatever. So it's an interesting topic. I mean, I think there's a line in scripture where, everybody's leaving Jesus, and then, Jesus basically says to Peter, like, hey, are you going to leave too? And he's like, to whom else would we go? And I sort of feel that way about the things that I'm pursuing, where it's like, my career, I feel like doing the coaching, the executive coaching, the performance coaching, I'm doing the type of work that I want to be doing. And really, I'm mostly interested in fulfillment, which I'm helping people with. But what people buy is performance. And so I'm more marketing it as, hey, performance. But we're kind of doing both. But I think that I'm in the career that I'm supposed to be in. So however long or not long it takes for me to be where I want to be, my pain tolerance is really, really, really high, because it's like, to where else would I go? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is why I'm on this earth. I love to dance. I dance salsa. I feel like that's a core part of who I am and why I'm on this earth, that makes me me. And so, I've continue to focus on dance, even though there's always many opportunities to quit because you're not as good as you want to be.
Sure.
Or even maybe the person that you think you're supposed to end up with. It's like you will try many times if you think that that's God's will for you. And so I think there's a great story which I will share in a second. But I think that to be able to have the pain tolerance and the endurance that it takes to achieve what people are wanting to achieve, I think they're going to need to try to have some self-awareness of why they think they're on this earth. Because if they have that, they're going to have the pain tolerance. But if they don't have that, like, there's no fucking way that I would go through all this pain for this if it was just some idea. If it works, it doesn't. If it's like, no, man, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
There's just one other thing that I want to share of the purpose. There was this one time I met this guy in Uber. It was a couple. And I love asking the couples, especially the married couples, how they met. And, what was that like? How was it different? Why this person? And because this is arguably the biggest decision of your life, right?
Sure.
And it's a beautiful story. And I share this story because it's sort of one of persistence and pain tolerance and feeling like this is what was supposed to be for you. And I think these things are valuable for people to hear because your pain tolerance is going to have to be very high. So he sees this girl in a bar and the guy says to his friend, hey, I'm going to marry that girl. And his friend is like, oh, whatever, he's being stupid. And so the guy goes over to the girl, and the girl's with her friend, and he asks her to dance. And she says no. And so he goes back and, handful more moments, however long go by. He goes back a second time. You want to dance? She says no. Third time, no. Fourth time, no. So at this point,
it's the same night.
Same like moments. Yeah. Same night, same location, same everything. Yes. And so at this point, the friend says to the girl that he has been approaching, hey, if this guy comes over here again, which would be a fifth time, and asks you to dance, I think you should go. And so the girl's sort of like, okay, maybe you're right. This motherfucker goes over a fifth time, asks her to dance. She says yes. They go out on the dance floor. Now she chimes in to tell her a little part of the story. They're out in the middle of the dance floor. She looks up at him. Something happened. She's like, I know this is supposed to be my person. They've been married like 40 years.
That's awesome.
They're like super in love. And it's like, but how many people would have done that?
Yeah.
How many people would have approached 5 times?
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just, are you willing to keep going through pain and through feeling like an idiot and feeling like you're looking stupid? And, I've had plenty of times in my life where I've been losing for long periods of time.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think this is a great nugget or whatever of wisdom for people, is that if you feel like that's something that's for you on almost like a spiritual level, your pain tolerance is so much higher than anything else that I know how to explain.
Yeah.
So that's something that has helped me a lot. Not that I'm necessarily like so courageously special and cool.
Yeah.
It's just that I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to be. And so I don't really know what else to do except to keep working at it because, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
On that note, let's leave on that. I love that story. That was fantastic.
Yeah,
that's awesome. It's the idea of persistence.
Story.
Yeah, the idea of persistence. And
it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
I love to tell it because it makes me happy when I tell it.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. So obviously I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you taking the time to come out and hang out with us. So where can people find you if they have any questions about like either their business and or what it means to be a part of your program? Like how can people find you? Yeah, sure. So you could try texting me, which is at 407-967-8391. We could also maybe put like a little link in the description. Sure. I have my Calendly, so people could kind of set an appointment if they would like to learn more. But yeah, really, this service is for business owners, really anybody who is maybe on sales commission, anything that is performance oriented, because the type of work we're doing, they're going to make more money because of it. So their return on investment is going to be better. Yeah. But it really is fulfillment too, And I think people are interested in the performance part. They come to you because they want more results or money. And if they think that you could give that to them, then they want that. But I think it's good for people to know that, this is really a fulfillment thing too, that this is figuring out
what this is for you and moving towards it, and that everything that you're actually wanting, whether it's money or fulfillment, in my opinion, comes from that process.
That's awesome.
So that's what we're working on.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. Well, listen, guys, thank you guys for watching. If you like what you're seeing, please make sure you like, please make sure you share. Please comment in the comments below any questions that you have, or if you'd like for me to cover any other topics. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say or any interest that you have. This has been Justin Sandler, just like Adam Sandler, only no relation. He's way better than Adam Sandler is. So make sure you check him out. I'll leave some information in the comments in the description below for you guys to follow. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, guys. All right. Cool. That was fun. I feel like we got to talk about a lot of good things.